The first thing I noticed when Laura walked through our front door after 6 months in Paris wasn't her designer luggage or her perfectly styled hair. It was the way she avoided looking me in the eye while announcing, "Jason, we need to talk. I'm pregnant." I set down my coffee mug on our granite kitchen counter, the one she'd insisted we install before her business trip, and stared at my wife of 12 years. Laura Staples Fairburn stood in our suburban Dallas doorway like she was posing for a magazine spread, her corporate power suit immaculate despite the international flight. "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat. Should I assume this miracle happened via immaculate conception, or did the Parisians develop some new long-distance fertility technology I haven't heard about? Laura's jaw tightened. At 36, she'd perfected the art of looking simultaneously beautiful and deadly. "Don't be sarcastic, Jason. This is serious." "Oh, I'm taking it very seriously. 6 months abroad, minimal contact, and now you're carrying what I can only assume is either Jesus Christ himself or evidence of your newfound interest in French culture." Our daughters, Beth and Janie, thundered down the stairs, backpacks bouncing. 10-year-old Beth, sharp as her mother but thankfully with my sense of humor, took one look at the tension between us and grabbed her little sister's hand. "Come on, Janie." Dad's using his scary voice again. "I'm not using my scary voice," I called after them. "This is my confused voice." My scary voice is much deeper. Laura waited until the front door slammed before turning back to me. "We'll discuss this tonight." "I have to get to the office." "Of course you do." "Wouldn't want to keep Scott waiting." She froze halfway to the stairs. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. Just noting your dedication to your boss. Very admirable in a subordinate." Laura's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I caught the faintest smile crossing her lips before she composed herself. "I'll be home late." "Client dinner." "Naturally." After she left, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen. As an IT project manager, I'd learned to notice patterns, anomalies, things that didn't add up. Laura's story had more holes than a government security system. I'd married Laura when she was a hungry account coordinator, and I was a junior systems analyst. We'd built this life together, the house in Plano, the girls, the comfortable middle-class existence. But somewhere along the way, Laura had decided she deserved better than a blue-collar kid from East Dallas who'd worked his way up through night school and determination. The Paris assignment had been her big break. 6 months consulting for a major client, working directly under Scott Williams, the golden boy of Morrison and Associates. Scott, with his corner office, his flashy Audi, and his reputation for mentoring attractive female employees. My phone rang. Chris Martinez, my best friend since high school, and the most honest mechanic in Dallas. "How's the reunion going?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect." "She's pregnant." Silence. Then, "Jesus, Jason. That's when?" "Great question. I'm no mathematician, but the timeline seems a bit fuzzy." "What are you going to do?" "Right now? Nothing. But I'm starting to think Laura's been getting more than career advice from her boss." That evening, Laura came home with takeout from an expensive downtown restaurant. She'd changed into jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "We should celebrate," she said, setting the bags on the counter. "The pregnancy, I mean." "Should we?" I'm still processing the miracle of it all. She poured herself sparkling water, me a beer. "I know this is unexpected, but unexpected. That's one word for it. Jason, stop. I need you to be supportive right now." "Supportive? Like how you were supportive when you took a 6-month assignment on another continent without discussing it? That kind of supportive?" Laura's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. This opportunity was too important to pass up. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me. I might be smarter than you think." She studied me like I was a problem to be solved. "Scott says the Paris project could lead to a partnership track. Real money, Jason. Not just this. She gestured around our kitchen dismissively. This being our home, our life, our family. This being mediocrity. The word hung between us like a blade. I took a long pull of my beer, tasting bitterness that had nothing to do with hops. Well, I said finally, I guess we should toast to your success then. And to the mysterious circumstances surrounding our impending bundle of joy. Laura raised her glass. To new beginnings. To truth, I countered. May it eventually come to light. That night, as Laura slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned. She thought she was married to a pushover, a small-town IT guy who'd be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw his way. She was about to learn that underestimating people can be a very dangerous mistake. The burner phone fell out of Laura's purse like a confession. I'd been looking for antacids. Laura's expensive dinner had given me heartburn, or maybe it was just her company, when the unfamiliar device clattered onto our bathroom floor. A cheap prepaid phone, the kind people buy when they don't want their activities traced. The screen lit up with a text notification. Missing you already, goddess. Can't wait for our next meeting in the office. -S, quote. My hands shook as I scrolled through the message history. 6 months of communications between my wife and Scott Williams, starting professional and quickly deteriorating into something that would make a porn writer blush. The hotel room overlooks the Seine. Perfect for what I have planned for you. Just thinking about your hands on me makes it hard to concentrate in meetings. -L. You're so much more sophisticated than suburban housewives. A real woman. So, Jason has no idea what he has. His loss. L. I sat on the edge of our bathtub, reading through months of betrayal. The messages painted a picture of two people who thought they were smarter than everyone around them, who mocked the little people while planning their affair in explicit detail. There was more. Photos Laura had sent. Pictures of lingerie I'd never seen her wear. Screenshots of hotel confirmations, restaurant reservations, even a jewelry receipt for a necklace engraved S and L forever. The same necklace I'd seen her wearing to client dinners. But the most damaging evidence was a series of messages about their plan to frame a coworker for embezzlement, clearing Laura's path to promotion. Scott had coached her on how to plant false evidence, how to manipulate the company's investigation process. Once Henderson is out of the picture, the partnership track opens up, Scott had written. We make a great team in business and pleasure. I feel bad about destroying his career, Laura had replied. Collateral damage, baby. Success requires sacrifice. Just not ours. I took photos of everything with my own phone, then carefully placed the burner back in Laura's purse. My wife thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. Time to show her the difference between tactics and strategy. The next morning, Laura was unusually attentive, making coffee and asking about my day. The performance might have been touching if I hadn't known she was rehearsing her lies. I've been thinking, she said, buttering toast with surgical precision. Maybe we should renew our vows. Make a fresh start. Interesting timing. Right after you got back from Paris. The trip gave me perspective. I realized what's really important. And what's that? Family, commitment, building something lasting. I almost choked on my coffee. Building something lasting. With Scott? Laura's hand froze halfway to her mouth. What? Nothing. Just wondering if your boss will be invited to this vow renewal, since you two work so closely together. Scott is a colleague, Jason, a mentor. Right, the kind of mentor who sends jewelry with romantic engravings. Laura's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. The necklace, Laura. S&L forever. Either you're having an affair with Scott, or you've developed a very strange relationship with Samsung Electronics. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile floor. You're being paranoid. And frankly, it's not attractive. You know what's not attractive? lying to your husband while carrying another man's baby. This baby is yours. Prove it. Laura grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I don't have to prove anything to you. You're supposed to trust me. Trust is earned, sweetheart. And your credit rating just got downgraded. After she left, I called in sick to work and spent the day planning. Laura and Scott thought they were untouchable, protected by corporate politics and social connections. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming. I started with Scott's car. The flashy silver Audi sat in the Morrison & Associates parking garage like a monument to ego. Scott had made a point of mentioning it at Laura's birthday party, casually dropping the price tag and performance specs while I nodded politely and imagined creative ways to humble him. I'd brought a bag of frozen shrimp and a small funnel. The shrimp went into the air conditioning vents. They'd thaw slowly, creating a smell that would make the car uninhabitable within hours. The sugar in the gas tank was a myth, but a banana in the exhaust pipe would create some interesting backfire effects. I left a note under his windshield wiper. Compliments of the husband. Next time, get a room with better security. Then I went home and waited. Laura returned that evening in a fury. Scott's car was vandalized today. Someone destroyed it. That's terrible. Any idea who might have done such a thing? The police think it was random, but Scott thinks it might be connected to the Henderson investigation. Henderson? A co-worker who's been acting erratically. Scott thinks he might be lashing out. I nodded sympathetically. Sounds like a troubled individual. Good thing Scott has such loyal colleagues to support him through this difficult time. Laura studied my face, looking for cracks in my performance. You seem awfully calm about this. Should I be upset? I barely know the man. He's important to my career, Jason. If something happens to Scott, it affects our whole family. Our family. Right. Speaking of which, when exactly are you planning to tell the girls about their new sibling? Laura's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and typed a quick response. Scott wants to meet tomorrow. He's concerned about security. Maybe he should invest in a better alarm system. Or park somewhere more visible. Maybe you should try being more supportive of my success, instead of making jokes. Oh, I'm very supportive of your success, Laura. More than you know. That night, I lay awake listening to Laura talk in her sleep. She mumbled Scott's name twice, and something about the plan. By morning, I'd decided it was time to accelerate my own timeline. The war had begun, and Laura had no idea she was already losing. Scott Williams stood in the Morrison & Associates lobby like a man who'd never been told no in his life. At 42, he had the kind of artificial confidence that came from expensive suits and a corner office. His handshake was too firm, his smile too practiced, and his cologne too strong. Everything about him screamed overcompensation. Jason! Great to finally meet you properly, he said, as if we hadn't been introduced at Laura's birthday party 6 months ago. Laura talks about you all the time. I'm sure she does. Probably mentioned how much I enjoy meeting her colleagues. Scott laughed, the sound sharp and artificial. She said you had a sense of humor. Listen, I wanted to discuss something with you about Laura's career trajectory. We sat in the lobby's leather chairs while Laura finished a meeting upstairs. Scott leaned forward conspiratorially, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a trustworthy tone. Laura is special, Jason. Brilliant. She has the potential to go all the way to the top, but she needs the right guidance, the right opportunities. And you're providing that guidance? I try to. The business world can be brutal, especially for women. Laura needs someone who believes in her abilities. How fortunate that she found you. Scott missed the sarcasm entirely. The Paris project was just the beginning. I'm positioning her for a partnership track, but it requires total commitment. Long hours, travel, networking events. I hope you understand how important this is for her future. Her future. And what about our family's future? Well, naturally, success benefits everyone. Laura mentioned you work in IT? That's a solid field. Stable. The condescension dripped from his voice like honey from a broken jar. Scott saw me as an obstacle to be managed, a small-town husband who needed to be placated while he stole my wife. Very stable, I agreed. I work with security systems, actually. Digital forensics. It's amazing what people think they can hide online. Something flickered behind Scott's eyes, but his smile never wavered. Fascinating field. Must be challenging, keeping up with all the new technology. Oh, I manage. You'd be surprised how often people make basic mistakes. Use unsecured networks, leave digital footprints, forget that everything online is permanent. Laura appeared at the elevator, looking polished and professional. She kissed my cheek, a performance for Scott's benefit, and slipped her arm through mine. "Ready for lunch?" she asked. "Absolutely. Scott was just telling me about your bright future together." "Scott's been an incredible mentor," Laura said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "I couldn't have achieved any of this without his support." "I'm sure you couldn't." We went to an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the waiters wore ties and the menu didn't list prices. Scott ordered wine without asking what we preferred, then launched into stories about his business conquests while Laura hung on every word. I excused myself to use the restroom and took a detour past the bar, where I'd noticed Scott's car keys sitting next to his phone. A quick switch, replacing his key fob with an identical-looking dead battery, and I was back at the table before the appetizers arrived. "Everything okay?" Laura asked. "Perfect. Just admiring the ambiance." Scott raised his glass. "To new partnerships and bright futures." "To getting what you deserve," I replied. After lunch, we walked Scott to his car. He pressed the key fob repeatedly, frowning when nothing happened. "That's strange. The battery must be dead." "Technology can be so unreliable," I said sympathetically, "especially when you least expect it." Scott called a locksmith while Laura and I waited. The banana I'd placed in his exhaust pipe that morning had done its work. When the locksmith finally got the car started, it backfired spectacularly, sending black smoke billowing across the parking garage. "Jesus!" Scott jumped back as his precious Audi coughed and wheezed like a dying animal. "Sounds expensive," I observed. "You might want to have that looked at." Laura shot me a suspicious look, but said nothing. Scott's face had turned an interesting shade of red that clashed with his expensive tie. "This is the second time this week," he muttered. "Someone's targeting me." "Maybe you should consider who might have a reason to be upset with you," I suggested. "Sometimes these things aren't as random as they seem." That evening, Laura confronted me in our kitchen. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, but her posture remained rigid, corporate. "You know something about Scott's car problems." "Do I?" "Don't play games with me, Jason. This isn't like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." Laura poured herself a glass of wine, her movements sharp and controlled. "What's this really about? Are you jealous of my success?" "Your success. Is that what we're calling it? I've worked hard for this opportunity, harder than you've ever worked for anything." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd worked 2 jobs to put myself through college, spent years building my career from nothing, supported Laura's ambitions, even when it meant sacrificing my own. But in her mind, I was just dead weight holding her back. "You're right," I said quietly. "I've never worked as hard as you have. Especially not in Paris." Laura's grip tightened on her wine glass. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. I'm sure those 6 months were exhausting. All that mentoring Scott provided, the late-night strategy sessions, the hands-on guidance. You're being ridiculous." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you got a lot more than career advice from your boss." Laura set down her glass and faced me directly. "Scott is a successful, sophisticated man who recognizes my potential. He's shown me what's possible when you think bigger than suburban mediocrity." "Suburban mediocrity? Like our marriage? Like settling for less than you deserve? The conversation ended there, but the war was just beginning. Laura thought she held all the cards, the job, the money, the sophisticated lover. She was about to learn that sometimes the quiet husband in the corner has been planning his own game all along. I spent that night in my office, organizing files and preparing for the next phase. Scott and Laura had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was too small, too ordinary, too grateful to fight back. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Nicole Chen had been Laura's best friend since college, which meant she knew where all the bodies were buried. She also had the discretion of a town crier and the loyalty of a mercenary, which made her perfect for my purposes. I found her at Starbucks on Thursday morning, scrolling through her phone while nursing a venti something or other with too many adjectives. Nicole worked in marketing at a competing firm, which gave her just enough insider knowledge to be dangerous and just enough distance to feel safe gossiping about Morrison and associates. Jason! What a surprise. She looked genuinely pleased to see me, which meant Laura hadn't poisoned that well yet. How are you handling Laura's big news? The pregnancy? Still processing. Not just that. The promotion. Scott's fast-tracking her for senior associate. Very impressive for someone so young. I sat down across from her, coffee in hand. Scott seems very invested in Laura's success. Nicole's eyes lit up with the predatory gleam of someone who had gossip to share. Oh, he is. They make quite a team. Very collaborative. Collaborative. That's one way to put it. Laura's lucky to have such a dedicated mentor. Scott doesn't take that kind of personal interest in just anyone. I'm sure he doesn't. Tell me, Nicole, in your professional opinion, what does it take to get that kind of attention from someone like Scott? Nicole leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Well, talent, obviously, but also chemistry, the right kind of partnership. Scott's very selective about who he works closely with. And Laura has that chemistry? Oh, definitely. You can see it when they're together. The way they communicate, finish each other's sentences. It's like they're on the same wavelength. I nodded thoughtfully. Must be nice, having that kind of connection with a colleague. Laura's always been ambitious, but Scott's brought out something different in her. More confident, more alive. Alive. Interesting choice of words. Nicole suddenly seemed to realize she might be oversharing. I mean, professionally alive. Engaged with her work. Of course. What else would you mean? That afternoon, I called Chris and asked him to meet me at Murphy's, a dive bar near his shop where the beer was cheap and the music was loud enough to cover private conversations. You look like hell, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thanks. You always know just what to say. What's going on? And don't tell me you're fine, because I've known you since high school and you've never been good at lying. I told him everything. The burner phone, the messages, the pregnancy timeline that didn't add up. Chris listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. Son of a bitch, he said finally. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy them. Jason, not physically, I'm not stupid, but I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they really are. Chris took a long pull of his beer. You sure about this? Once you start down this road, there's no going back. There's already no going back. Laura made that choice in Paris. What do you need from me? Information. Scott drives that Audi to your shop sometimes, right? For service? Yeah. Pretentious asshole always complains about the wait time. Next time he comes in, see what you can find. Receipts, papers, anything that might be useful. Chris nodded slowly. I can do that. But Jason, be careful. These corporate types play dirty when they're cornered. Let them. I've been playing nice for 12 years. Time to show them what dirty really looks like. The next evening, Laura came home late again, claiming another client dinner. She'd been working late every night since our confrontation, either avoiding me or meeting Scott. Probably both. I was in the living room with Beth and Janie, helping with homework when she walked in. The girls ran to hug her, and for a moment Laura's mask slipped. She looked genuinely happy to see them, genuinely guilty about missing bedtime again. "How was school?" she asked, kneeling to their level. "Mrs. Patterson said we're going to study France next week," Beth announced. "She said you just got back from there." "That's right. Maybe I can help with your project." "Did you bring us anything?" Janie asked with 7-year-old directness. Laura's smile faltered. I was so busy with work, honey. But maybe we can go shopping this weekend." "You promised you'd bring us something," Beth said, her voice carrying a note of disappointment that cut deeper than any accusation. "I know, sweetheart." Mommy made a mistake. After the girls went to bed, Laura poured herself wine and sat across from me in the living room. We hadn't really talked since our kitchen confrontation, just exchanged logistics about schedules and responsibilities. "The girls seem upset," she said. "They missed you." 6 months is a long time in kid years. "I know. I thought this opportunity would be good for all of us, but maybe I was wrong." For a moment, she sounded like the woman I'd married. Uncertain, vulnerable, human. Then her phone buzzed, and I watched her face transform as she read the message. "I have to go out," she said, standing abruptly. "Where?" "Work emergency. Scott needs me to review some documents before tomorrow's presentation." "At 9 p.m. on a Friday night?" "Important clients don't keep bankers' hours, Jason." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I followed, catching her arm gently. "Laura, wait." She turned, and for a split second, I saw something like regret in her eyes. "I know things have been difficult between us," I said, "but we can work through this. Whatever's going on, we can fix it." Laura looked at me for a long moment, and I thought she might break, might tell me the truth and give us a chance to salvage something from the wreckage. Instead, she pulled free of my grip. "Some things can't be fixed, Jason. Sometimes you have to choose between what's comfortable and what's right for your future. And you've made your choice?" "I made it 6 months ago." After she left, I sat in our empty living room, surrounded by family photos and memories of a life that was already over. Laura had chosen Scott, chosen ambition over love, chosen to throw away 12 years for a chance at something she thought was better. But she'd made one crucial error in her calculations. She'd assumed I would accept her decision quietly, fade into the background like a good suburban husband should. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I opened my laptop and began typing. By morning, I'd have a plan that would give Laura and Scott exactly what they deserved. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference, and they were about to learn what it was. The partnership announcement came on a Tuesday, delivered via company-wide email with Scott's signature corporate enthusiasm. Laura had been promoted to senior associate with a clear path to partnership, effective immediately. The timing was perfect, just weeks after her return from Paris, just days after her pregnancy announcement. I read the email on my phone while sitting in Morrison and Associates' parking garage, watching Scott's replacement Audi gleam under the fluorescent lights. He'd gotten the car detailed, trying to erase the evidence of my previous visits. Too bad he couldn't detail away what was coming next. Laura's celebration dinner was at the same upscale restaurant where we'd had lunch with Scott. She'd invited Nicole, a few colleagues, and me, the supportive husband, there to smile and applaud while she accepted congratulations for sleeping her way to success. I arrived early and positioned myself at the bar where I could watch the entrance. Laura walked in with Scott, their body language screaming intimacy to anyone who cared to look. She wore a black dress that hugged her still flat stomach, and Scott's hand rested possessively on her lower back as he guided her to our reserved table. Nicole arrived next, followed by 3 other Morrison and Associates employees I recognized from company functions. They gathered around Laura like courtiers around a queen, offering praise and predictions of future success. "Jason!" Scott called out, waving me over with the false bonhomie of a man who thought he'd already won. Come celebrate your wife's achievement. I joined the group, accepting handshakes and making small talk while studying each face. These people knew about the affair, maybe not the details, but they knew. The way they avoided eye contact with me, the careful phrasing of their congratulations, the subtle distance they maintained. In corporate America, adultery was just another networking strategy. A toast, Scott announced, raising his wine glass. To Laura Staples Fairburn, the most talented associate I've ever had the pleasure of mentoring. To Laura, the group echoed. I raised my water glass. Someone had to stay sober for what came next. To getting exactly what you deserve. Laura shot me a warning look, but Scott was too drunk on his own success to notice the subtext. Laura's promotion is just the beginning, he continued. She's going to revolutionize how we approach client relations. Her insights during the Paris project were absolutely brilliant. I'm sure they were, I said. Laura's always been very hands-on with her work. Nicole giggled, wine making her indiscreet. The Paris project was definitely hands-on. Laura told me all about those late-night strategy sessions. Nicole, Laura said sharply. What? It's not a secret that you and Scott worked very closely together. The results speak for themselves. I leaned forward, my voice carrying just enough to reach the neighboring tables. Tell me more about these strategy sessions. I'm fascinated by modern business practices. Scott's smile tightened. Perhaps we should focus on the future rather than rehashing old projects. Oh, but the past is so instructive. For instance, I've learned a lot about digital security lately. Amazing what people leave on their phones thinking it's private. The temperature at our table dropped 10 degrees. Laura's face had gone pale, and Scott's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his wine. Technology can be intrusive, Scott said carefully. Privacy is becoming a real concern in the digital age. Absolutely. Take burner phones, for example. People think they provide anonymity, but everything's traceable if you know where to look. Laura stood abruptly. I need some air. I'll come with you, Scott said, rising. Actually, Scott, why don't you stay? I'd love to hear more about your mentoring philosophy. Scott sat back down, trapped by social convention and his own arrogance. Laura walked toward the restroom, her stride stiff with barely controlled panic. Your wife seems upset, Nicole observed. Pregnancy hormones, I said. You know how it is. Emotional volatility, morning sickness, unexpected cravings. Though I have to say the timing of this pregnancy is remarkable. How so? One of the colleagues asked. Well, Laura was in Paris for 6 months. I'm no doctor, but the math seems interesting. Scott's wine glass hit the table harder than intended. I think you're misunderstanding the timeline. Am I? Because I've been doing some calculations, and either this baby was conceived via immaculate conception, or Laura was more productive during her Paris assignment than anyone realized. The table fell silent. Nicole's eyes darted between Scott and me, her wine-flushed brain finally processing the implications. The other colleagues suddenly found their plates fascinating. Jason, Scott said, his voice low and dangerous, I think you're letting your imagination run away with you. My imagination? That's funny because I've always been more of a facts and evidence kind of guy. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos I'd taken of Laura's burner phone messages. Scott's face went white as he recognized his own words displayed on my screen. You're so much more sophisticated than suburban housewives, I read aloud. A real woman. That's quite a compliment, Scott. Very professional. Put that away, Scott hissed. Why? These are just business communications, right? Nothing inappropriate about a boss telling his married subordinate how much he enjoys her hands-on approach to client relations. Laura returned to the table, immediately sensing the tension. What's going on? Just sharing some of your professional correspondence with your colleagues, I said. They're very impressed with your dedication. Laura's eyes fixed on my phone, and I saw the moment she realized her secret was out. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the calculating woman underneath. "Jason, we should go," she said quietly. "But we haven't finished celebrating your success." Scott was just about to explain his innovative approach to employee development. Scott stood, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This conversation is over." "Is it?" "Because I have 6 months of conversations right here. Very detailed conversations about hotel rooms, romantic dinners, and plans to frame innocent coworkers for embezzlement. Should I continue reading, or would you prefer to explain to everyone how you've been mentoring my wife?" The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were staring, sensing drama but not understanding the details. Scott looked around desperately, realizing that his reputation was about to be destroyed in the most public way possible. "You don't understand the situation," he said desperately. "I understand perfectly. You're a predator who uses his position to manipulate vulnerable employees. Laura's not your first victim, is she?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you seduced a married woman with promises of career advancement, got her pregnant, and now you're both trying to pass the baby off as mine." Laura grabbed my arm. "Stop, please." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I'd married, but a stranger who'd traded our family for a corner office and a married boss who would never leave his wife. "You made your choice, Laura. Now live with the consequences." I stood, leaving cash on the table to cover my portion of the bill. The entire restaurant was watching now, phones out, recording the meltdown of 2 corporate climbers who'd thought they were untouchable. "Enjoy your celebration," I said to Scott, "and enjoy explaining this to your wife. I'm sure she'll be very understanding." As I walked away, I heard Laura calling my name, heard Scott trying to salvage the situation with damage control and corporate speak. But it was too late. Their secret was out, their reputations were destroyed, and their carefully planned future had just collapsed in the most spectacular way possible. The war wasn't over, but I'd won the first major battle. And Laura and Scott were about to learn that public humiliation was just the beginning of what I had planned for them. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, Laura moved out of our house and into a downtown apartment. The girls stayed with me. Laura claimed she needed space to think, but the truth was simpler. She couldn't face their questions about why Daddy was so angry and why Mommy was never home anymore. Scott had been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. The company couldn't ignore the evidence I'd provided, especially when other female employees came forward with similar stories of inappropriate mentoring. His wife had filed for divorce and frozen their joint accounts, leaving Scott scrambling to maintain his expensive lifestyle on unemployment benefits. But Laura and Scott weren't finished. Cornered animals are the most dangerous kind, and they were planning one final desperate move. I learned about it from Chris, who'd been monitoring Scott's visits to the auto shop. Apparently, Scott had been asking questions about my schedule, my routines, where I kept important documents. He'd also been inquiring about security systems and whether Chris knew any discreet private investigators. "They're planning something," Chris warned me over beer at Murphy's. "Scott's been talking about getting evidence of harassment, maybe setting you up for something. Let them try. I've got everything documented." "Jason, these people have nothing left to lose. That makes them unpredictable." Chris was right, but I was ready for them. I'd spent weeks preparing for their counterattack, and when it came, I'd be waiting. The setup was almost laughably obvious. Laura called on a Friday evening, claiming she'd left important papers in our home office and needed to retrieve them. She sounded vulnerable, apologetic, almost like the woman I'd married. "I know things are complicated between us," she said, "but I still care about you, Jason. About our family. Maybe we could talk, try to work something out." "What about Scott?" That's part of what I want to discuss. I think I made some mistakes." I agreed to let her come over Saturday evening after the girls were at their sleepover. What Laura didn't know was that I'd installed a comprehensive security system throughout the house. Cameras, audio recording, motion sensors. Everything would be documented. She arrived at 8 p.m., looking smaller somehow in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual power suits. She'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, standing awkwardly in our foyer. "What did you want to talk about?" "Us, our marriage, the baby." She sat on the couch where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies with the girls, where we'd planned our future and shared our dreams. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant," she continued, "about choices and consequences. You were right." Was I? Scott isn't who I thought he was. When the investigation started, when his wife filed for divorce, he blamed me, said I seduced him, that I was just another desperate housewife looking for excitement. "And now you want to come home?" Laura's composure cracked. "I don't know what I want. Everything's falling apart. My career, my reputation, my future. Scott won't even take my calls anymore." "What about the baby?" "I don't know whose it is, Jason." I honestly don't know. For a moment, I felt something like pity for her. Laura had gambled everything on a fantasy future with a man who saw her as disposable, and now she was facing the reality of her choices. Then I heard the soft click of the back door opening. "Expecting someone?" I asked. Laura's tears stopped instantly, and I saw the calculation return to her eyes. "Jason, I can explain." Scott appeared in the doorway, holding a small recording device and wearing latex gloves. Behind him was a man I didn't recognize, probably the private investigator Chris had mentioned. "Well, well," Scott said, his voice dripping with false confidence. "Caught in the act." "The act of what?" "Threatening your wife." "Harassment." "Intimidation. We have it all recorded." I laughed, the sound echoing through our living room. "Do you?" "That's interesting because so do I." I pulled out my phone and activated the security system's live feed. On the screen, we could all see Scott and his accomplice breaking into my house, Laura's performance, the recording device, everything. "Smile for the cameras, Scott. This is going straight to the police." Scott's face went white. "You can't..." "Can't what?" "Document criminals breaking into my home? Record my estranged wife attempting to frame me for harassment? I think I can, and I just did." The private investigator was already backing toward the door. "I'm out." This wasn't part of the deal. "Wait!" Scott called, but the man was gone, leaving Scott alone with his failed scheme. Laura stood slowly, her mask finally dropping completely. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? I think I've documented everything I need to destroy both of you completely. We'll see about that." She pulled a gun from her purse, a small pistol I'd never seen before. Scott jumped back, his hands raised. "Laura, what are you doing?" "Fixing this," she said, her voice cold and steady. "Jason dies in a break-in gone wrong. Scott panics and runs. I'm the grieving widow who inherits everything." "You're insane," Scott whispered. "I'm practical. Jason's life insurance will set me up nicely, and with him gone, there's no one to contradict my version of events." I looked at my wife of 12 years, the mother of my children, and realized I'd never really known her at all. She was willing to murder me for money and convenience, to orphan our daughters for a fresh start. "The cameras, Laura. Everything's being recorded. I'll destroy the system after. Make it look like the intruders did it." She raised the gun, and I saw my death in her eyes. Laura had moved beyond desperation into pure sociopathy, willing to commit murder to escape the consequences of her choices. But she'd made one final mistake. She'd assumed I was helpless. I pressed a button on my phone and the house's security alarm screamed to life. Emergency lights flooded the room, sirens wailed, an automated voice announced, "Break-in detected. Police have been notified. Suspects are being recorded." Laura spun toward the sound, and I lunged forward, knocking the gun from her hand. It skittered across the hardwood floor as we struggled, Laura clawing at my face while screaming incoherently. Scott tried to run, but the front door had automatically locked when the alarm triggered. He was trapped, beating on the reinforced glass while sirens grew louder outside. Police burst through the door 3 minutes later, finding Laura on the floor in handcuffs, zip ties I'd kept in my pocket for exactly this scenario, while Scott cowered in the corner, babbling about how this wasn't his idea. The lead officer looked around at the cameras, the recording equipment, the gun on the floor, and shook his head. "Looks like you were ready for them." "I've been ready for weeks. Everything's documented. The break-in, the attempted frame job, the murder attempt, it's all on video with audio." Laura looked up at me from the floor, her face twisted with rage and defeat. "You bastard! You planned this whole thing. I planned to protect myself and my daughters from a sociopath. Congratulations, Laura. You finally showed everyone who you really are." As they led her away in real handcuffs, Laura screamed threats and accusations, blaming everyone but herself for the destruction of her life. Scott went quietly, already planning his defense strategy and probably wondering how much his lawyer would cost. I stood in my doorway, watching the police cars drive away with the wreckage of my marriage. Tomorrow I'd have to explain to Beth and Janie why their mother wouldn't be coming home. I'd have to help them understand that sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they're supposed to love most. But tonight, I was free. Free from Laura's lies, Scott's arrogance, and the toxic web they'd woven around my family. They'd gambled everything on their ability to manipulate and destroy me, and they'd lost spectacularly. Laura had been right about one thing. Some things can't be fixed, but sometimes that's exactly what you need. A complete break from the past, a chance to build something new and honest from the ashes of betrayal. I locked the door and turned off the lights, leaving the security system active. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, custody hearings, and the long process of rebuilding. But for the first time in months, I slept peacefully, knowing that justice had finally been served. Laura and Scott had gotten exactly what they deserved, and I'd gotten something even better, the truth, documented and undeniable, and the freedom to start over without them.